Greetings and welcome to my channel. This is Sorcerer Tal. You can also find me on Facebook in the Sorcerer's Guild. Today on Magical Theory, we are going to be talking about how to fly during astral projection and lucid dreams, as well as I will be unveiling the Korus, which is a sigil that is a culmination of the S1 project and a few other projects that I hadn't realized how fully they were connected to that until I connected it all up with the Korus. But we will get to that towards the end of the video. First, we are going to be talking about, well, I'm going to tell the story of how I first learned to fly during my lucid dreams, and then we will talk about a few other techniques that other people have used and the discussion that we had in the Sorcerer's Guild on this topic this week before I posted this video. Okay, so let's start with the story. Okay, I began lucid dreaming at a very young age. The reason for this, I actually had a dream. We'll go ahead and we'll start there. Okay, so I had a dream when I was about 4 years old that I was being chased by a werewolf through a funhouse of mirrors. So I'm being chased by this werewolf through all these different mirrors and stuff, and I'm getting real scared. You know, I'm only 4 years old. And eventually, the werewolf corners me in the funhouse, and I can't figure out where to escape. And this is when I realize that I'm dreaming. So I turn into a silver bullet, and the rest of the dream, I'm chasing the werewolf through the funhouse, and I'm like a cartoon silver bullet. You know, like on the cartoons, you'll have a bullet that actually chases the person around after they shoot. And I'm this cartoon silver bullet chasing this wolf all around the funhouse until I eventually woke up. Okay, so anyways, that's how I first began lucid dreaming. But after that, I eventually began wanting to fly. And the first thing that I tried that actually succeeded was I had a swing set. And whenever I needed to fly away from wherever I was or wanted to fly away from wherever I was, I would get in the swing set and swing back and forth until I got high enough up that I would feel this level. I would actually kind of feel this like planing out of the air, like air pressure almost. And once I hit that, the whole swing set would pick up and fly and go up over the hill or whatever and go flying as far as I could see, because I would kind of throw the swing set. And I did that for quite a while, but I eventually wanted to do better than just flying the swing set. So I began trying to throw myself, and the way that I got that to work was I would actually swing my butt back and forth as fast as I could, and then throw my hip, like in my butt, at whatever it was I wanted to fly towards. And I just kind of throw myself that way. And I'd feel that level. As I was swinging my butt, I'd feel that air pressure or level change, and I'd get my butt on that and throw it. And all of me would go flying towards whatever it was that I was trying to fly towards. And from there, I eventually began to learn to feel that level. So I could actually do it with my hands. I would just hold my hands out in the dream and pull that level into my hands and begin rising up from there. And then, when I was about 15 and I first started working with this technique, well, I was about 13, I think. Anyways, I was in my early teens, and I was beginning to fill it with my hand, and I got on that level, and I found it, and then I got stuck up there. For about 3 years, all of my dreams, I was about 5 feet off the ground. And in some ways, this was really handy, because it gave me a lot of practice with lucid dreaming, because, well, it's hard to notice, it's hard to miss that you're floating 5 feet off the ground at all times and literally can't touch the ground. So every dream I had was immediately lucid, because as soon as I fell asleep, I'm like, oh, I'm floating. Okay, well, I'm dreaming again. But it was very frustrating because at the same time, I couldn't touch the ground. I'm up in the air. If I got in a fight, I'm just like kicking at the person's head. It was infuriating in a lot of ways, and that lasted for about 3 years. And then finally, I got to where I could get that level in my hand again instead of on my feet, and I learned to balance it. And so from that point, I began learning to like hold my hands kind of like this one's pushing down, and then this one's rising up, kind of like this. And I just ride the pressure and push on it. And from there, I've learned to very easily float around and dance around all over the place. And it becomes it became quite simple at that point, but I couldn't really whoosh, go shooting across like Superman until I learned to hold my hands more like this and kind of direct the force into a smaller beam. Like how we have a hose, and if you constrict it a little bit, it goes spraying everywhere, but the more you constrict it, the more force you get out of the end of the hose. That's the same thing I'm doing with this air pressure, is essentially pushing it into a smaller aperture, a smaller opening, so that it shoots out faster, and it goes, and that's how I finally learned to whoosh, until I recently discovered how to work with the Korus to fly. But we're going to get to that a little later on. So, that's my story of how I learned to fly. Now, like I said, I posted a video, I posted this as a guild question earlier this week in the Sorcerer's Guild, and there were a lot of really interesting answers. What was interesting to me is a lot of them still had this idea of a force, but a lot of them seem to be drawing it from the sacral chakra, or from somewhere around that area. The same area that I was swinging back and forth, with my butt when I was throwing it, or from the abdomen. And they talked about imagining yourself a little bit forward after centering yourself on your belly, or sacral chakra. I honestly don't know how to pronounce that word. I've done videos on chakras before, so you can see my opinion on them if you want to see a video here. But I really don't know how to pronounce some of them, I suppose. I think it's sacral chakra. We all know the one I'm talking about. Anyways, a lot of them talked about balancing the energy there, and then imagining that energy drawing you to where you wanted to go. A lot of people talked about directing force directly from the hands. Quite a few people just kind of naturally did it, or even just kind of power jumped, until they eventually learned to power jump perpetually. One technique I tried another time, actually, on my own, after I was already learning to fly. I remembered from Douglas Adams the idea that flying is the art of throwing oneself at the ground and missing. Yeah? And that actually can work in a dream. If you you just kind of throw yourself at the ground but not want to hit the ground, sometimes that will be enough to get you flying. Because it's just the idea, for the most part, you're just getting your mind to accept the idea that you can fly. And whatever technique you have to use to convince your mind that's okay, and circumvent the psychic censor that says that is something you can't do. Okay, so mostly we've been talking about doing this in lucid dreaming. Now, we can also astral project and fly. And it's a little bit easier there because we're often much more in control of our thoughts with lucid dreaming. But the same rules apply for the most part. There was someone in the guild that actually said that they flap their arms like a cartoon character to fly. And I mean, like I said, really what we're aiming for here for the most part is finding a technique that our mind will accept. And if you're really into cartoons, your mind might be just fine with that narrative that you flap your arms until you start flying. It doesn't really matter how we get there. But anyways, in astral projection, pretty much the same rules apply. Another technique that I have used is the dream staff, which I have mentioned in other videos. And I have actually used that to draw the flow into the staff and then propel it forward from there. And that was actually another technique where I got moving pretty fast before I learned the jet propulsion by pushing it down into by refining the beam down into a smaller, more forceful flow. So let's see, what other techniques are there to talk about before we get to the chorus? Well, it's all about, a lot of them had that idea of just simply willing oneself up and forward. There was the idea of the power jump, which we already mentioned. I don't want to keep repeating myself, so let me just think if there's any that we have missed here. that I found that I thought would be useful to people? Well, a lot of them, like I said, were essentially boiled down to the same idea of centering the self and then imagining yourself farther along. Along with this idea of flying, there's also the idea of teleporting oneself in a dream. Now, this is something that, for some reason, I was able to do much easier than flight. For teleporting, really what all you have to do is imagine yourself into a new scene. Now, I say that as if it was simple, but for me that was quite difficult, and, well, getting to the new scene. Like I said, teleporting itself was easy, except for that it was actually just a way of waking myself up. I'd will myself out of the scene and immediately wake myself up every time I tried it. And I eventually learned that if I imagined it like a bunch of threads in a pattern, which makes sense, yeah? Because I talk a lot about reality being a weaving of threads. If we imagine all of the threads kind of just opening up and loosening just enough for us to slip through the threads and then into a new situation, that is the best way I found to travel from one scene to another through teleportation. Is you imagine the scene, the threads within the scene loosening just enough that you can slip through. Like if you had a tapestry and you were pulling at the threads and wiggling them around just enough to make a bit of an opening to pass something through, which in this case would be oneself. And so for me, that's how teleportation is achieved. We also have stuff with the S1 sigil, and the Korus could probably be used for that as well, but I don't want to guarantee that because I haven't tested it yet, but I can totally see how one would use it. But now that we have segued into that, let's go ahead and talk about the Korus. Okay, I'll cut to an image of it here. And as you can see, it is what was originally my Minion's sigil with a triangle in the center. Now the Minion sigil is the thing I used to create the yeast minions. I'll leave a video for that here. And at the time, I thought I was simply creating a servitor, and that eventually became minion servitors, and that eventually became attached to my altar servitor, which I also have videos about. But what I was really doing there was responding to a pull from my higher self to embed that sigil within this realm. Like we was doing with the S1 sigil when I had us bringing it down. I was doing the same thing with that sigil and not fully realizing it. So I was building a foundation on my altar, and we've actually talked a little bit about that already in the sigil, in the video about the Cosmic Collective. But I'm realizing that I had still a lot of my own thoughts confusing the communications. So over the next year, we're going to be finding clarity in the communication through using the Korus sigil, which, like I said, is that minion sigil, and then with a triangle in the center of it, which draws us across the bridge. And so, this is the Korus. And the Korus is something that is intended to link us with the Cosmic Collective, and as well as link us all together, much like the linking sigil or the Ellis. And in fact, this sigil, as I said, is a culmination of that S1 project, which linked to the Ellis sigil, and we've had a evolution of sigils over time, which I will leave a link to the playlist, so you can see the evolution of how we have got here with that sigil and created that bridge. And as I discussed before, a bridge in the astral realm is also a portal and a vehicle. And so that is what we are discussing today with using the Korus, is using it as a vehicle. And there are two ways. Well, there's more than two ways to do this, but there are two ways we will be discussing today. The first is during astral projection. Okay, so we have a swirled circle with a triangle in the center that has a direction on it. To use the chorus to fly, what you do is simply visualize the sigil in your mind. And then, as you have it visualized, imagine the circle part coming down towards your feet, coming up under them, and the triangle then raises up and becomes like the steering wheel. And you would hold it with one hand, like so, or however you feel natural holding it to direct it. And then the triangle comes up into your hand, and you push it down a bit to go forward, rise it to raise, and pull back to slow down, lean it to one side to turn that way, lean it to the other side to turn the other way. Much like a plane works, if you're familiar with the idea of yi and yaw. Either way, you turn that, you lean, it's like leaning to one side to turn that way, leaning to the other side to turn the other way. And once you have this, it becomes very responsive. So if you're in a dream and you realize that you are dreaming and become lucid, you can then call upon the chorus to become a vehicle, which is a floating platform essentially, with the triangle part being the steering. And this technique I have found works quite well, and you can move very fast, whooshing almost immediately, going anywhere you want to go by simply pushing on the triangle and imagining yourself moving forward. It becomes very responsive to your mind as you learn to use it. Now, I have tried this technique in dreams several times, and I have had excellent results with it. I haven't tried the teleportation. I will try that tonight in my dreams and give another update. And how I am theorizing that we would do that is pull up the chorus, bring it onto the same platform idea, but then when the triangle rises up, imagine it as a button, and as you push down on the triangle, you would be allowing that same opening up of the threads that I discussed earlier and slipping into the area that you visualize on the other side. Like I said, I will be trying that in a dream tonight. Okay, so astral projection using the chorus. The chorus can be used to astral project in and of itself. And so to do that, we would simply enter into meditation and visualize the chorus, much like I discussed the S1 sigil 4. But we want to visualize the chorus with the circle, and then the triangle, and visualize yourself entering into the sigil. Imagine yourself being pulled into it and rising up out of your body. Okay, so, and it's quite effective. You just imagine it pulling you up and out. And then you begin astral projecting, and you could use it as a vehicle as well, in the same way, once you are in the astral projection state. So, like I said, you just close your eyes, visualize the sigil, and allow it to pull you up and out of your body and into the astral realm, or even onto the astral equivalent of the physical plane. Now, I have only done that a few times, and it's already quite effective for me. So this is a very effective technique so far. And I don't think that you would have to have had success with other forms of astral projection to use this. That being said, I'm not guaranteeing that the very first time you use the chorus, you're going to have an astral projection experience. You might have a full-on out-of-body experience, because it is quite potent. But I'm not guaranteeing that, and you will want to keep working with the sigil. Just like any other technique, the more you use this technique, the more powerful it's going to become. Now, as I said, we are going to be discussing many uses for the Korus throughout the year, throughout this coming year, and there will be a bit more on that I will want to discuss on the culmination of the S1 project as the results have become more clear and I find that I am more integrated with the concept of communicating with my higher self to this level. Okay, so I think that's going to be it for this episode. Thank you once again for joining us. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please take the opportunity to do so now, and don't forget to hit that like button. Okay, so that'll be it for this episode. Until next time, bright blessings and an interesting fate. This has been Sorcerer Tell.